Hi, everyone, and welcome to Heritage Talks Online. My name is Heather Darch, and I'm joined today by Glenn Patterson, and we are project directors for the Quebec Anglophone Heritage Network. QAHN is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to preserve and promote the history, heritage, and culture of Quebec, and in particular of English-speaking communities spread right across the province. If you go to our website at QAHN.org, you'll discover a wide range of activities and projects that we're involved in. All of our projects, including Heritage Talks Online, are successful in large part because we have the generous support of people like you, our community of supporters who are joining us today. So thank you very much. We could not do what we do without you. You're welcome to become a member of QAHN as well, and membership is open to everyone, including community groups and heritage organizations. So please check out our website for more information about us and our many projects, and to keep up to date with what we're doing, and to discover and connect with the organizations in our network right across the province. Membership enables us to provide quality workshops and programs and projects that you cannot find anywhere else, including our publication called Quebec Heritage News. And this is filled with really well-researched articles and photographs and histories and stories about people, events, and places that you will rarely find in history textbooks. So if you enjoy a good read about history, and want to find out more about our province and to receive your own copy and join with a great dynamic network of people, that's what membership will get for you today. For first-time new members, you can take advantage of a special 30% discount promotion for a one-year membership. If you're joining us on Facebook, please just send us a private message on our Facebook page saying that you're interested in taking advantage of the 30% discount, and we'll walk you through the process. If you're on Zoom, you can just put a message in the chat box and let us know about that. But take note, this offer is only valid during the length of time of this broadcast. So don't wait, sign up to become a QAHN member and become a part of our great community. I would like to thank our funders who help in part to make this series possible, including Canadian Heritage, the Secretariat for Relations with English-Speaking Quebecers, the Chalkers Foundation, the Zeller Family Foundation, and the Townshippers Foundation. The Heritage Talks online series has a really super lineup of researchers, writers, and historians, and you can discover all the presentation dates and times of broadcast on our Heritage Talks Facebook page or by going to QAHN's website. You can join the talks either through Facebook Live, and you don't have to have a Facebook account or your own Facebook page. This site is a public site, so it's open to everyone. And you can join by Zoom as well. And you can find the links to the Zoom on the Facebook page in all the different posts that we have for our speakers. You just have to click on the link and sign up, and here you are. We're going to be accepting questions from the audience at the end of our speaker's presentation. So if you have any questions, you can type them into the comment section on Facebook Live, and Glenn will ask the questions to our speakers on your behalf. Or if you're on Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature. It's at the bottom on the Zoom window, just to the right of center and under the reactions tab. Or you can just do old school and wave your hand. That's perfectly fine. Just as a courtesy though, we ask you that you keep your video off and your mute button on as well until the end of the presentation. And then I encourage you to please turn your video back on again so that we can start to create a community and conversation with our speakers. So our talk this evening is called Notable Women of the Pontiac. And I think you might think that our speaker is actually one of those notable women when you hear her profile. Tina Therrien is an occasional writer and a full-time timber framer. I think that's amazing. She lives on a small homestead in rural Quebec. Co-author of 2 books on natural building, Tina also writes a monthly article about country living for the newspaper, The Lowdown to Hollenbach News. She counts herself lucky to gather stories from her local elders. She was honored to take part in the Notable Women series through Fairbairn House. For a few minutes tonight, Tina will be joined by Helen McKinnon, the coordinator of the Fairbairn House Heritage Centre in Wakefield, Quebec. Helen is going to tell us about the current online exhibition called Notable Women of the Pontiac. So good evening to you both. Hello, Helen and Tina.
Should I unvideo? Hi, how are you this evening?
Very good, and welcome to Heritage Talks Online. I'll turn the proceedings over to you both now.
Great. We're going to do a bit of a tag team thing here because we're actually in the same room. So I'll be manning the slides and Tina will be doing most of the talking. So we've got a good team of women here in the office. Thanks very much, Heather. I appreciate your lovely introduction. And we are, in fact, really delighted to be able to present this exhibit online because we've had COVID has been with us and we had wanted to exhibit this exhibition in person, and it has been delayed till later this summer, this fall. So in the meantime, we've decided to put it online. I work here as the coordinator at the Fairbairn House Heritage Centre. And given that this is a province-wide presentation, I wondered if I would just share a few images of Fairbairn House so that people could see what Fairbairn looks like. So I have a few images to share with you. You can see here. And Fairbairn House is a century-old home, 161 years old to be exact, located in Wakefield, Quebec. And it was built by a Scottish immigrant, very common in this area, William Fairbairn and Jean Wanless. William Fairbairn was, in fact, a millwright by trade and was the first to build a grist mill on the La Pêche River. We feature and develop exhibitions on the Gatineau Valley. We host events on site throughout the summer. We have on-site programming for adults and kids. And we also host the Tourist Information Center for the municipality of La Pêche. What you see here in front of you is a heritage barn that was built and reconstructed from two local barns that were in disrepair and got donated to us. And we use this space as an exhibition space as well as our house. So we're really happy to have this barn on our site that was erected in 2018, I believe. And of course, this is our site. In the fall, we have an outdoor stage. We have shows on the outdoor stage as well. So we have kind of a lot of, we're busy in the summer and on site, and we're really happy to be able to present this to you. We also wanted to tell you that we are, of course, located right next to the Wakefield Covered Bridge, which is a bit of an iconic symbol here in Wakefield. And here is the last view of the covered bridge to show you. I'm next going to share you the opening screen of the Notable Women's exhibit, and I'm going to talk just a little bit about why we decided to do a Notable Women exhibition. And it will come as no surprise to you to find that women's history is not often in the history books. And so back in 2018, we decided that it would make a great subject for an exhibition. And so we originally started with the Notable Women of the Gatineau Valley series, and that it was a larger series of 10 women that we featured. We had it on display here and it toured around in the area as well. And since then we've added Notable Women of Aylmer and lastly, Notable Women of the Pontiac. La raison d'être of the exhibition, of course, is that it's really important to highlight the contributions of women in our communities, and it is often sadly missed. There were, I wanted to share with you the selection criteria that we had for being a notable woman in our exhibit. It was really quite simple. One is it needed to be a long-lasting impact. Two is the individual needed to be no longer with us, no longer alive. And thirdly, and interestingly, we needed to have good quality photos to be able to produce an exhibition in banners and such. So that was unfortunately some of the determining factors of getting photos and really good quality photos for some of our older notable women, or turn of the century women. You will note that the women featured in this series are primarily from the Anglophone community, as these regions that we have featured are historically had a very strong English-speaking settlement and representation. So we didn't want to exclude other communities, but really, when we looked historically, that was what came to the front. I want to also single out and thank our collaborators, the Pontiac Archives and the Pontiac Historical Society, who were really invaluable in unearthing these stories and sharing them with our researcher, Tina Therrien. And of course, our funder, Heritage Canada. The exhibition will also be accessible through our website, fairbairn.ca. And I invite you to share that with those who couldn't make the show tonight, to go online, and the Pontiac Women's Exhibit will be on there for people to consult from now on. So please share it with your friends. Without further ado, I'll pass the baton on to my colleague Tina, who was the lead researcher and writer on this exhibit, and we were really happy to have Tina collaborate with us on this. So on to you, Tina.
Thank you, Helen. I think that Helen might take us through a few of the slides with images of our collaborators while I get ready to tell you about these women. But before I get there, I wanted to say that this has been so much fun being involved in this project. I had people phoning me to tell me about stories of their loved ones or their friends, or someone from the Women's Institute that they really thought should be part of this project. So I had the great honor of listening to all these stories and recording them, and then trying to weave it all together. Before I start, I do want to definitely say thank you to Venetia Crawford from the Pontiac Archives. She knows where every single file folder, where every photo on everyone who's ever been part of the Pontiac is. She's a notable author and historian. She collects songs and stories, and she's delightful. So thanks to her and to everyone else who answered emails or phone calls and entertained me with delightful stories. I'm only sorry that we had about 20 women on our list, and I'm only sorry that we couldn't tell all of their stories. However, we did have to start somewhere. So I think we're ready to begin with one of the first women in our slideshow. And by the way, just a quick hello, I saw a few names there: Mary Pritchard and Helen Rutliff, Barbara Houghton and Elizabeth Dixon. I might have missed other folks who stepped in, so maybe we'll see you later. So women, the notable women from the Pontiac, they were movers and shakers and innovators. They delivered mail by moose. What else did they do? They taught children how to square dance on horseback. They were involved in money laundering and so many more other things. They were politicians and midwives and just really amazing women. I might tell you some of those stories tonight if we have enough time. So we'll start with Abby Stewart Pritchard. Abby Pritchard was born in 1883. She was born in the little hamlet called Wyman. And at the time when she was in Wyman, there was a train station there. There were trains coming daily, and it was quite a vibrant hub, which is probably really different from how it might appear today. When I did a Google search to find Wyman, I got a satellite pin, but I didn't really see Wyman itself. So I think when she lived in Wyman, it was a really different place. Her family owned the general store and the post office. And when her father passed on, it fell to Abby to take over the duties of running the post office. One of the things that she had to do as the person taking care of the post was to run over to the train station and collect the sacks of mail. So she developed a relationship with the train station and had a love of traveling. So she ended up getting a railway pass so that she could travel freely. I'm told that she really loved traveling. And one of the stories that was told to me, her family loved to tell of her going abroad as a young woman. She got on a steamship and went to England on her own and traveled. So she definitely had some leisure time in her life, and she worked hard and saved money and was able to do these kinds of pleasurable things. She loved her family, and along with her cousin Sam, she organized the very first Pritchard family reunion in 1932. And that's a tradition that still carries on today. When you're from these rural parts, people always like to know, oh, are they the Mahans from the Mahans over in Wakefield, or are they related to the Mahans over in Low, Quebec? So it so happens that this Pritchard family is related to the Pritchards in Alcove, and there's a cemetery there that you pass by on the 105 that the family takes care of. I think once a year they go and they clean it up. In any case, she and her cousins started the family reunion, which carries on to this day. I think they missed last year because of COVID, but it's kind of neat that until she became ill in 1959, she was on a committee. They actually had committees for this family reunion, so it must be quite something. So those were sort of some of her beginnings in organizing. She also was quite involved with the Women's Institute, which we'll delve into here. In 1897, the Women's Institute was founded by Adelaide Hoodless in Stony Creek, Ontario. She really wanted to offer education and support, especially to rural women. Adelaide had lost her son. He drank some contaminated milk at some point, and she really didn't want other families to go through the suffering that she went through. So the Women's Institute was born, and word spread quickly, and chapters popped up across the country really quickly, and even over into Great Britain and beyond. So it obviously was something that was felt like it was really needed at that time. I think that this photo that we're looking at must have been a women's convention meeting, which I'll get into shortly. And it may very well have been taken by Abby Pritchard, who was quite an avid photographer as well. So Abby took that handy dandy rail pass that she had, and she hopped on the train and went to the MacDonald College, which is it's a part of McGill University, actually. She attended the School of Home Economics, where the Women's Institute had headquarters there. And so she was quite interested in what they had to offer. The college was offering courses in making soap, plucking chickens, sewing, food preparation, all those kinds of things, which in these COVID times would probably sell out in a heartbeat. Abby looked at this at a time when refrigeration was rare and realized that food safety and some of the other things that she saw at the college might be helpful in her little community, her thriving community of Wyman. So she invited the Dean of Household Science to come to Wyman, and she assembled a group of women. And that very night, I believe that the Wyman branch of the Women's Institute was born. It's one of the oldest chapters in Quebec. I think certainly it was the first chapter of Women's Institute in the Pontiac. So it's been around for quite some time. In this photo that we have here, this is another convention meeting at MacDonald College. They have every year they have a reunion. I'm pretty sure that Abby is the short little woman there, but I would have to ask Helen Rutliff later to confirm that with me. There were very kind people out there, Mary and Helen, who loaned us these photos so that we could share them with you. So the Women's Institute actually became more like a life career for Abby. She was involved in her local chapter, but she went on to she held different positions: president, secretary, treasurer, at the county level, and also at the provincial level. So she also, something that's really neat is from 1914 until she became ill in 1960, she attended every convention of the Women's Institute at MacDonald College, sometimes acting as secretary and sometimes as photographer. So she really committed her life to this institution, and she believed in it fully. The Women's Institutes in Quebec have been active in schools, providing education for children, pushing for dental inspections, bringing music into the curriculum, and agricultural studies. But apart from that, they've also been involved in a lot of other safety initiatives and pushing for legislation, such as getting stop signs at railway crossings, having traffic stop when school buses are stopped, getting breathalyzers utilized, and all kinds of other things just to help make our roads safer. So I think today they've branched beyond that, and even prior to today, probably looking at environmental initiatives, both locally and abroad. I know that women's institutes are really helpful with women in developing countries as well. So they really are quite resourceful, and Abby played a large part in that. She was the first woman in the Pontiac to receive the distinction of life membership, and I think her pin is maybe here somewhere, both provincially and federally. And shortly before her death, she was named honorary vice president of the Quebec Women's Institute. When she died in 1960, she bequeathed her estate to the Quebec Women's Institute. I think initially she was hoping that she would be able to have enough funds there to purchase a house that other women from the Institute could move into when they needed to, but there wasn't actually quite enough money. There's that beautiful pin. So the interest from this money now is in a fund, and woolen blankets are purchased for women from the Institute who are in the hospital or ill or just in need of a bit of comfort in their later years. So I think it's really fitting that Abby Pritchard continues to provide comfort for women in the Women's Institute all these years later. That's our Abby. And we'll move along now to our next candidate. She's not a candidate, she actually made it to the finals. Adelaide Florence Riley Devine. I love her name. She was born in 1889, and she stands out as an incredible example of what rural women endured living out in the backcountry with a large family. She was married in 1903. She had 11 children in all. She was a seamstress, a midwife, a storyteller, a mother, and quite an active member of her rural community. We'll look a little bit at her family and how she started her early life. She met her husband when she was 14 years old at a box social. So box socials were fundraisers in which, back in the day, I think that maybe they've been resurrected in modern times, but not in the same way. So at a box social, the women would decorate a lunch box, a cardboard box, and they would create a lunch or a meal, a lunch or a supper for 2 people, and they would bring it to the auction. And the men at the auction would look over all of these decorated lunch boxes and they would bid on them. It was supposedly anonymous, but I'm not sure. I think sometimes they knew who they were bidding on. In any case, the story goes that Joseph, her husband, bid on her lunchbox. He wasn't her husband yet, let me just say that. And that was that. I guess they hit it off. They must have had a good lunch together. And soon afterwards, they were married. And she had her first child at the age of 15, when she was just a mere child herself. I have a 15-year-old, and she's not doing that. This would be the first, as I mentioned, the first of 11 children, though, for Adelaide rather. In their early married life, they moved around to quite a few different homesteads with a short stint in Shawville. Her husband worked as a shoemaker, but there was a little bit too much competition. And when they saved up enough money around 1915, they bought a homestead near Thorn. Now, Thorn, even today, is quite a remote, desolate area of the province. So there certainly weren't very many people living nearby. I'm not sure how appropriate the land was for farming, but in any case, she was set out in this isolated place in Thorn. But the good news for her is that her parents lived 4 kilometers away. Now, that doesn't sound too bad to us, but of course she had to walk that distance, but still, I'm sure it was really comforting for her to have her parents somewhat nearby. Her husband worked for several months at a time away at a logging camp as a cook. So Adelaide ended up being home alone with her children quite a lot. And she had to take care of the animals and the homestead and all of the rest of it. But as was pretty common with a large family in those days, she would enlist the help of her older children to go get firewood or go to the well to fetch water that she could heat up on the stove. A lot more challenging tasks than what we ask our children to do in these modern times. But they seem to be very happy, and they always seem to have enough. They had big gardens, and their days were definitely very physical, you know, a lot of physical labor. Adelaide probably would start her days off in the summer by stoking up the wood cook stove in the house so that she could bake the bread for the day and not overheat the house. Then she'd go on to tasks like making butter or going down to the river with the washboard and the children to wash the clothing. Yes, the children helped. Good idea, I think. So she definitely worked hard. And when the other part about her husband being away was his paycheck would come in every couple of weeks. So it fell to Adelaide to walk to Shawville from their home. It was a 24-mile round trip trek, or 38.6 kilometers if you prefer. So most times she would have to walk that distance. Sometimes she might get lucky enough to be picked up by horse and buggy, but generally speaking, every few weeks she could expect to have to walk to the bank. Whew, that would be tiring in itself. When her husband was home, as a cook, he also pitched in with some of the things like making bread and buns and other foods. So I'm sure that was really a relief to Adelaide when he was there. And as was common at the time, Sundays were set aside for visiting or for resting at the homestead. I'm sure it was well deserved. One of Adelaide's children died during childbirth. The child survived, and Adelaide adopted that child. So she ended up with 12 children in all to feed and clothe over her time. And here we see a family shot. It's not the whole clan, but I do see the twins there. I'll tell you about the twins right now, actually. When she was 34 years old, she had her twins, and her doctor said, Adelaide, you should stop having children now, after giving birth for the 10th time. But she did go on to have one more child 6 years later. Adelaide was a talented seamstress and was often in demand for her skills. So the neighborhood girls would come and ask her if she would sew wedding dresses for them. And they would also come and ask her if she would help decorate their lunch boxes for the box socials. Remember how successful she was with hers. So she may have been serving the role of matchmaker as well as all of the other things that she did. She couldn't really say no to anyone, and she was always helping people, whether it was by giving of her time or sharing a meal with people. She learned the skill of midwifery from her mother, and she was called upon pretty often for her skills, as most families back then had a lot of children. So she was constantly being taken out of the house in the middle of the night, or, you know, by buggy or by sleigh, depending on the season. And if the new mother wasn't doing well, she would stay with that mother and the new baby for a week at a time if needed, and leave the care of her children to either the older siblings or her husband if he was home on a leave. So she didn't actually get paid for her efforts, not so much, not usually anyway, but occasionally she'd get a sack of potatoes as payment, which with a large family probably came in pretty handy. Despite what sounds like it might have been a hard life, Adelaide also made time for parties and fun things. She and her husband loved hosting house dances, and she was apparently quite a storyteller. The neighbors, both adults and children alike, would come and sit at her knees and listen to her tell stories for hours. So I really would love to hear an Adelaide story. I think that would be amazing. In the last few years of her life, they realized that Adelaide she could earn more money than her husband by working as a home care, doing home care for an elderly woman nearby. So she would go and live with that woman during the week. Her husband would stay home with the children, and they had a little more money to themselves. However, she took ill at the age of 46 with something called quinsy, which I think, from my research, it looks like it's some sort of abscess on the tonsils. And the doctor wasn't able to get there in time. I can't help but think that if Adelaide Florence Riley Devine had been born at a different time, she might have lived a longer life. But she certainly stands out as a remarkable rural homesteader, and I was so pleased to learn of her story. We're going to get ourselves situated with something that's even different from our first two ladies. We have Elsie Gibbons here. Elsie was born in 1903, and she lived almost to be 100. She was just a few months shy of turning 100 when she passed on. She spent her whole life in a place called Pontiac du Fort, which is a small town about 100 kilometers west of Ottawa, right on the Ontario-Quebec border. in her early married years, she was involved in pretty diverse activities. She sewed clothing, she took in sewing for people, she cooked and sold her baking, and she also wrote articles for a couple of newspapers. Her and her husband had dairy cattle, and they sold milk to the local cheese factory until their house burned, and then they had to start over with a new plan. So for a little while, they took a stint, both of them, on a local logging steamship, the Hiram Robinson, where Elsie cooked for the men, and at night she would sit up on the top deck and crochet and look out over the river. So I think those were actually pretty nice years for Elsie. When her and her husband saved up enough money, they opened a grocery store in Portage du Fort. And in 1948, when Ontario Hydro started working on the Chinook generating station, they added a restaurant to the store to provide meals for the construction workers. Very smart idea. And they also created some lodging for them. Whenever a dam was being built in an area, there was quite an influx of workers, and suddenly there was a need for food and other things. So they filled that gap for the construction workers. And when the construction workers were paid, they would get a check, and they didn't necessarily have time to go to the bank. So Elsie worked out a deal that she agreed to cash their checks in exchange for 25 cents per check. And so as a result, sometimes she had these bundles of money that she had to carry around with her. On one particular day, when she had said bundle of money, she was heading off to her neighbors for the weekly card party. She went to the spare room to put her coat in there where everyone else had put their coats. And she had this bundle of money, and she didn't want anyone to know she was carrying around this stack of money. So she saw a water jug, and that you would have had in a room at that time. And she stuffed it in the jug, went and had a great time playing cards. And when she went back to get her money, she realized that there was water in the water jug, and the ink from the checks had all bled out. So now it was this messy, purple, watery, swollen bunch of money and checks. So she wrung them out as best as she could, went home, draped them all around her kitchen, ironed them, and took them to the bank, where they took that money out of circulation, actually, because it was so damaged. I think only one check ended up having to be rewritten in that time. But anyway, that was her money laundering story. If we think this was International Women's Week, and we think of how far we've come, if we think back to 1940, that was when women in Quebec were given the right to vote in provincial elections. A scant 13 years later, Elsie Gibbons became the first woman to act as mayor in the province of Quebec. There's kind of a funny story about how she found out about being mayor, as recounted by Elsie and reported by Venetia Crawford. Elsie was out buying supplies probably for the restaurant, and Father Lynch met her in the street and told her she better hurry home. "You've got a job to do," he said. He didn't tell her what that job was, but when she got home, there was a crowd of people there cheering her on. She had been elected mayor by acclamation. So she then served as mayor from 1953 to 1971, which was quite a long stint. In addition to her role as mayor, Elsie was the first female warden in Pontiac County from 1959 to 1961. When she was first elected as mayor, she was given the title Mayor of Portage du Fort, Mrs. Gordon Gibbons, the naming conventions at the time where you hid behind your husband's name. When she became warden, the name changed to Lady Mayor Elsie M. Gibbons. That's a slight improvement. Eventually, I think she just became Mayor Gibbons. I don't think she minded either way. When she was in a 1960 interview with a journalist, she stated, "Women should come out to the front and stop hiding behind their husbands. They have the ability and are quite capable. They could do wonders if only they thought so." So I think she really believed in her abilities and in the abilities of other women in politics. One of the main jobs that awaited Elsie as mayor was bringing a waterworks system to Portage du Fort. Many thought it was an impossible feat. They thought it was going to be too expensive. Portage du Fort was located on rock, and they thought it was impossible. And her husband even told her she was crazy, but she didn't care that much. She said, all you need was a little bit of courage and conviction. That was all to get the people to go along with you. So go along with her, they did. They were, at the time, people without wells were paying 40 cents a barrel for water. So I suppose it was very attractive to imagine water coming to the village. in addition to that, it meant indoor plumbing and indoor toilets. So it was a pretty popular move in the end. She had many hats, not just mayor and warden, but she also was chair of the school board and president of the Rebecca Lodge. And she played the organ at the church for 60 years. 60 years, she must have known all those songs by heart. She baked cakes and helped organize local events in her spare time, and I'm not sure when that would have been, but she was quoted as saying that attending meetings was her hobby, and I think we all know people like that. She served as mayor for 18 years straight, and in her 2 years off, she served as councillor. She was elected as councillor, and then she was re-elected for a 2-year term in 75, after which point she stepped down. I guess she was ready for a new chapter. She did pave the way for women in municipal politics in Quebec, and in 2017, the Federation of Quebec Municipalities created the Elsie Gibbons Award to recognize women's contributions to municipal politics. In 2016, the MRC of the Pontiac, which is the local municipality, they named their new council chambers the Elsie Gibbons Hall, so that Elsie Gibbons is honored every time they have a meeting there, and her achievements will not be forgotten. Well, there has been an increase in the number of women involved in municipal and provincial politics in Quebec since Elsie Gibbons' time. Obviously, there's still a lot more room for improvement. And last but definitely not least, we're gonna jump to Rosalind Dixon. Now, she was born in 1921. She lived, I think, to be 96 years old. And honestly, I don't know how she managed to cram all she did in her life. We looked at her list of achievements and her hobbies, and she must have been amazing. I think she must have been a powerhouse. She must have been a heck of a lot of fun. She was an ambitious and thoughtful, creative force to be reckoned with. She was born into a family of chocolatiers, social activists, and political writers. So at an early age, she learned the power of words, both spoken and written. She could converse with truckers, royalty, politicians, foresters alike. It didn't matter to her. People were people. And she had a very strong work ethic, I think, in thanks to her upbringing. She was pretty darned motivated, and she had a strong drive and ambition. She managed to pull off obtaining a 4-year BA in psychology in just 3 years, just to give you a little example. So she certainly wasn't afraid of hard work, rolling up her sleeves and digging in. She got married in 1942 to her husband, David. They moved to Kingston, where he was going to be attending Queen's. They had started their family at this point, and in addition to looking after their children, Rosalind got herself busy. She took in boarders. She sewed clothing for people, well, certainly for her children. I'm not sure if she actually took in sewing. I don't want to tell lies. She also edited theses for professors and students, being right on a campus there. So she was certainly always working with words. When they moved to Ottawa, Rosalind and her husband got their feet wet in the newspaper business, publishing the Family Gazette, which was a community newspaper. During those years, of course, she didn't want to sit idle. She also started a home and school association. She taught Sunday school, and she chaired the hospital committee of the Ottawa Citizens Committee on Children. She also wrote articles for the Journal and Ottawa Daily newspaper. I can only imagine how energetic she must have been. So when the Equity newspaper came up for sale in 1953, Rosalind and her husband jumped at the opportunity, and they moved to Shawville with their family and started a new chapter of their lives. They founded the Pontiac print shop, and Rosalind split her time between her family. They had more children. I believe she had 7 children in all, but lost one in his infancy. So she had a large family to look after. She was involved with reporting and editing and page layout, all the things that you would have to do in a newspaper, and editorial writing. She was editor of the Equity for over 3 decades, and her writing was persuasive and thoughtful, and she took up causes she felt passionate about. I think she must have just loved what she did, but she wasn't going to just fall over, and she definitely, if she had an opinion, you would know about it. As if her time working at the Equity and raising such a large family wasn't enough, Rosalind dove into numerous community events over the years. She was manager of a hockey team. She founded the first community library. She started a brownie pack. She started a children's theater group, and she taught children how to square dance on horseback. Now, what I think is the most amazing about that is she also must have trained the horses to square dance, right? She did love horseback riding, so that must have been amazing. I would love to learn how to do that. So if any of her family members could teach me, I would love that. She was the first woman to sit on town council in Shawville, working on initiatives such as seniors apartments and revamping the town's water system. That's a theme we've heard about a couple times tonight. And in her spare time, if again, as if she could have any of that, she was the drummer in the town's band. She also hosted and produced TV and radio shows, and she was sought after as an editor from many authors. She lost her husband just shy of their 50th wedding anniversary. And after that news, Rosalind kept herself busy, as would have been her style. She helped her son Ross launch the Hill Times in Ottawa, a local newspaper. She worked tirelessly to preserve the National Press Club and wrote several books herself. She was quite involved with internet training and studies, and she helped to launch Freenet, which was the first free email service provider in Ottawa. Along with another group of women, she petitioned for a children's hospital in the region when she was living in Ottawa. This was probably the first steps towards the creation of CHEO, the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. In her retirement at the age of 81, she earned a master's degree in journalism from Carleton University, and she taught writing at Ryerson University. In 1982, she received a Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal, and in 2017, she received the Lindsay Chrysler Award for Outstanding Contribution to Community Newspapers in Quebec. No kidding. 3 decades of editing and all the writing that she did. I just want to leave you with a couple of little quotes. There was an interview in a publication called Aging Horizons Bulletin. She was asked how she fell in love with the net. And Rosalind replied, "I've not fallen in love with it. I just use the internet as a means of communication. I use the phone, but I'm not in love with it. Through time, we are presented with one medium after another, and all have been useful. Tomorrow, there will be another not yet invented, and yet we will still probably be using pencils along with sundry other ways of communicating, including smiles, grins, shrugs, sighs, and raised eyebrows." In her son Ross's words, she didn't spend much time worrying about the past, about what might have been. Instead, she looked to the future and how she could make it better. It seems like in her 96 years, she did make life better in her community, digging into events and causes that helped other people. So that's a quick little tapestry of 4 women and their stories, and trying to condense them into a short talk. This was easier than, behind me you can see the banners. We had only 250 words per woman for the banner, so this felt like a bit of an expansion and liberation. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. It's so much easier than just knowing I'm talking to my computer, which I've been doing for a couple of days. I want to thank QAHN for inviting us to come and do this presentation, and to Fairbairn House for trusting me to tell these stories. Thanks to everybody who helped to weave these stories together through all of your contributions. Now, I know Heather mentioned that we would be opening up the floor to questions or comments, which we're about to do. I will let someone else take over that. But also, if you didn't have questions, since this is a notable women exhibit, if you have a notable woman in your life and you'd like to tell her story, please do. And if we don't have time for that today, please record those stories. Our history is so much richer for those stories. Thank you.
Tina, that was wonderful. What a delightful presentation. Thank you so very much. Each of the women, Abby, Adelaide, Elsie, Rosalind, I mean, amazing women. I think it's wonderful you included Mrs. Divine, because she sort of represents that every woman, you know, with 11 children and working so hard and doing that round trip walk to the bank and cooking and cleaning. And it's just extraordinary. She probably wouldn't think that she was a notable woman. She was probably just doing the work like so many other women, but I think it's quite wonderful you included her story. So I'm going to ask everybody to please turn their cameras back on, and I'm sure we can open it up to questions for sure, because that was really extraordinary. And even the last woman, I mean, you know, a Jubilee medal, you know, that's quite extraordinary. And square dancing horses. I mean, what? It's quite wild. So here we go. We'll see. We have people coming back on to create a little community for us, and I'm sure we'll have some questions. Please just use the raise hand feature, or you can wave your hand around. Old school. That's just perfect. We'll just wait till everybody gets on here. I think Pierre, do you have a question? I saw your hand wave around, so you just have to unmute yourself. There we go.
Yeah. Well, basically, it's not so much a question. It's a couple of remarks. First of all, for Madame Divine there, when she moved to Schwartz at that time, as far as I know, that was a German immigrant community at the time. It was totally people, all Thorn and Schwartz out there were community of, so she would have been really isolated in there.
Yes, that's a good point. You're absolutely right. There are a lot of German immigrants in that region, and so yes, I'm sure it was helpful to her to have her parents nearby at her farmstead.
Not that long ago, I got caught in Oktoberfest in there, and never will I get caught in that traffic jam again. They're not good one, Madame Gibbons. The presentation doesn't point out the extent of the importance of the municipality of Portage-du-Fort at the time. Portage-du-Fort was a huge paper mill out there that was destroyed in the last couple of years in an environmental mess, which is an absolute disgrace. But at the time she was there, it was one of the most important paper mill in this country, making very high quality paper, including photographic paper. And it was boomtown, basically. So she wasn't running a small town community, an isolated community in the boondocks out there, okay? And the building of the Chenot Dam, together with a generating station that's beside it now, made the town of Portage-du-Fort a really, really, you know, prosperous city. She was at the basis, you know. I mean, I remember going to the Portage-du-Fort fire hall, and they had better equipment in there than they had in the big cities, because the paper mill was subsidizing the local volunteer fire departments type of deal to reduce their own insurance premium. And she was running a really an important village at the time. You know, now the last lady, of course, I've been in the office of the paper there a number of times, and I've never seen her, and if I've seen her, I didn't know who she was at the time. But this was a gathering spot for ladies and fellows of a certain age out there, right in the newspaper. This type of deal, you know. Yeah. Anyway, much appreciated. Very interesting. Okay.
Thanks for that feedback. It's interesting to hear the stories. We only have so much time to gather these stories, and it would have been nice to meet you, Pierre, prior to doing this presentation. But thank you, taking note.
I think that's always the way, Tina. You meet, when you're doing oral history, you always meet family members later or exhibits later. But so I'm really glad you encourage people to get out there and record voices now. And because those voices come along later, other people do say, oh, I remember that person. So it's great that you're doing this project. I was interested too that you talked about the Women's Institute, because Elizabeth Beach started the first Women's Institute in Quebec in Dunham, which is not too far from here.
That's right, yeah.
So, yeah. So that's very cool. Anybody else with a question?
Yeah, it's Elizabeth Dixon here. It says I can't turn my video on because the host has me turned off. So I'm just mentioning that. That's why my picture is blocked out. Okay.
I'm sorry about that. I should have.
Here we go. There I am.
There we go.
Thank you, host. It's a wonderful, wonderful evening you put on. I've just been thrilled by all 4 of your stories. It's just great. I think my mother, Rosaline Dixon, would have loved to hear those things said. She was always so busy thinking about what was next that she didn't think a lot about what had already happened and what it all added up to. So I think she would have been thrilled. And her name is an unusual one. I don't think I've ever met another person with her same name, and it is Rosaline.
Okay, I'm going to say, I was calling her Rosaline until a reporter from the Equity called me and he called her Rosalind. I said, oh, I was using the wrong pronunciation all this time.
No,
I'm sorry.
I don't know who that would have been, but no, he's a definite Rosaline.
Say it like it is. Thank
But
you.
congratulations for all that work you've done on the people. I just think it's marvelous.
Thanks to you for your help as well.
I saw Beverly Renault had a question there. Beverly, do you want to turn on your mic? I can help you if you need. There you go. You'll just see a message there, Beverly.
Okay.
Yeah, all good.
Okay. Just want to mention my mother-in-law. Her name was Maud Norris. She was born in Jersey Channel Islands. Now, her parents and they came to Quebec when she was 6 months old. And when she was about to turn, well, she started also the first Golden Age Society in Ville-Saint-Laurent. And she did 65 years of volunteer work. And the city of Saint-Laurent, the mayor of Saint-Laurent, requested that Queen Elizabeth should give her a medal for all her years of volunteer work. So she received a medal, but when she turned 65, she wanted to get her old age pension, but she was not born in Quebec. So her daughter said to Mom, pack your bags, we're going to Jersey. So they flew to Jersey, she got her baptism record, all her church records, came back, and then she had to go through immigration. So she went through immigration, and then she got a photo of her immigration as a citizen of Quebec. And she put that out on her wall. So yeah, she lived to be 89 years old with a lot of volunteer work.
There were so many women at that time who volunteered so much. Thank you for that beautiful story.
Yeah.
Susan?
There, I'll just unmute myself. Hi, I'm Abby Pritchard's great niece. I know there's a few of her relatives online here tonight. When you mentioned the Women's Institute, I just happened to find my copy of the cookbook.
Oh.
Which, well, obviously it was post 1978 because they put that out, but it was a collection of really interesting recipes, which I'm not sure can be duplicated. And some say things like a few ingredients and then mixed like Edna, so I mean, they're very of the time and fun to look at and sort of quite historical, and so I thought about that when you mentioned the Women's Institute, because I know it's still thriving in the community. And the other thing was, because I remember going as a kid with my siblings to visit our grandmother, and Aunt Abby would be there, and we would go down to the store, and at one point, and I'm not sure what the year was, but the store burnt down with a fire, and that's when the post office stopped being there, because it really wasn't necessary, I suppose, with other things being so close. So Wyman is now a crossroads, and when it's much smaller than I remember it as a kid, but I'm sure other people have different recollections, but that's where that store is no longer there, but it was a huge part of our oral history of our family as well. So yeah, and that's Wyman, which is now a signpost.
Yes.
Yeah.
I see that there's a question, and maybe Helen and you, Tina, can answer it. It is, was there anything you learned about the women that was a surprise to you or unexpected as you were doing your research?
Well, the money laundering surprised me for sure. One of the women who we didn't include in the exhibit, the story goes, and Venetia Crawford tells it much better than I, but when she got married, they were given a team of moose, and she and her husband delivered mail by moose. That was a surprising story to me. I sure wasn't expecting that when we didn't have any photos or really much more of a story than that, but that was probably the biggest surprise. You know, I think the biggest surprise for me was just to look at each of these women's lives and realize how rich they were, how busy their days were, how giving they all were to their communities, and some of them with pretty large families. I don't know if one story stands out in particular that surprises me, though. Mm.
I don't know if, Helen, did you
Okay.
have anything
Oh.
else to add? No, go ahead, sorry.
I'll just chime in here in terms of our dialogue with Tina and I when we were working on this exhibition. Tina would come back from this research and say, "You'll never guess what these women did. What have you done today?" It was pretty astonishing. It made us really think about our daily lives and really, in a way, how easy we have it. Certainly in some of the older pioneer women, but very much a touchstone, like, oh my dear, these women were so accomplished. They did family, they did career, they did homesteading, they sewed there for their family. They had very full days. It was really impressive. So really, I think Tina and I were both very much in awe.
It really makes you wonder how they managed. You know, it's each of the stories, their lives are packed, and they have children, and like not just one, they have many. So it's extraordinary. Me too. Whenever I study women's history, I'm just astounded that the path that they laid for us all. You know, it's and it's so easy to forget it as we go through our lives, how hard the women worked that are our ancestors. And I'm so impressed with the stories that have come out, and so many relatives are on in the session tonight too. And I think that's really quite wonderful. There's another question that said, never knew you could ride a moose, but can we hear the names of some of the runners up? So if these are the most impressive, do you happen to have some just stories, other people on hand from the community that you can remember?
Oh my, I should have brought my list with me. It might be here, but I don't really feel like fiddling around to try and find them. There was a woman named Wilma Labine who owned the Labine Hotel. She was one of the women. Gee, you know, I've focused so much on the women who actually were selected by our committee that right now my brain is full and I'm drawing a blank for other names. I'll try and think about it as we move forward here.
That's okay, Tina. We get those kind of questions, right? In the presentations, it's like, oh, can't remember. No, that's all right. And the person who asked, Tanya, says, no worries, Tina. So there you go.
Oh, Tanya. Okay.
Yeah, Tanya, there you go. Glenn, are there any questions coming in from Facebook?
I didn't see any on Facebook. Just there was a comment from someone writing. I guess she was talking about a feisty, smart, and involved woman dedicated to the community. As a journalist who wrote for the Equity, I knew she was always deeply involved. There's a bunch of touching comments on Facebook. Anyone here on Zoom, if you want to go check them out after. Obviously, a lot of people are related as well. So we have a lot of viewers from the Pontiac. So I want to say hello to all those people and thank them for tuning in tonight.
I do want to just maybe in closing say how anxious we are to present this exhibition in the Pontiac. Finally, we hope that with COVID restrictions and vaccinations and things being lifted that we'll be able to do so later summer and the fall. I'd love to see it at the Shawville Fair. I'd love to see it displayed in other community settings in Shawville, and it can tour in Shawville and area as well. So we're really looking forward to making those arrangements when we're allowed to do so. And also there are 3 banners for the Pontiac women, another 3 for Aylmer, and then another 10 for the Gatineau Valley. So in all, the exhibit is 18 banners if you want to have room to show them all, or it could be divided up. So for those who are listening from the Pontiac, certainly get in touch with us if you have any good venues that you think that we could show them at this fall, because we would love to do a proper exhibition opening and gather and celebrate these lovely women.
Well, I thank you both very much. I think that's the end of our questions, so we can bring the evening to a close. I just want to thank you for a really informative presentation. I'm hoping that your exhibit goes really well. If you haven't seen it, go check it out online. It's fantastic. You'll revisit some of the pictures that you saw this evening. Thank you, everybody who joined today as well. We've had quite a good crowd from the Pontiac, from Wakefield, Shawville, but also to the townships, Montreal. So that's one small silver lining from this pandemic year, is that we can do these kinds of events and have a really great audience. And so Tina and Helen, you really informed a very wide audience how great the women of the Pontiac were and are. So thank you very much. For those of you that like to join us on these presentations with Heritage Talks, I'll just let you know our next one is on Tuesday, March 16th at 7 o'clock, where Fergus Keys is going to tell us about our Irish neighbors. Meet your Irish neighbors, Irish Quebecers who made a difference. And he tells me that we're going to discover how many Irish people there actually are in Quebec that we had no idea were Irish Quebecers. So that sounds like a lot of fun. So that's Tuesday, March 16th, right here on Heritage Talks online or on Zoom. And you can just register on Zoom if you'd like to join us again. That would be great. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Glenn, for taking care of everybody and getting us in and out of Zoom the way we do. And until next time, I wish you all a very good evening. And thank you again to our speakers, Helen and Tina. It was really wonderful. Have a good night, everyone.